here's an example of a slide that is really almost like fictitious data. And the reason I say that is because what Jose and I are doing is really assessing um, um, what our perceptions are of the differences between the way video discussion, interactive activities, and live presentation are different in a face-to-face class from a flipped class. So what we're saying is in a live class, there's not a lot of video, but in a flipped class, there's going to be significantly more. The same thing here. In a face-to-face class, there might be actually less discussion because you're mixing lecture and presentation into the mix. So it might be the students are only spending roughly half of their time or maybe even less. But in a flipped classroom, there's going to be a lot more discussion, both asynchronous in between classes as well as in classes. The same thing with interactive activities, and that's like group work, breakout sessions, having students pair off and do a little research and come back and share with the class. This activity area, I would say, is the singularly most important thing in flipping is how you get students to interact in the classroom space. The asynchronous interaction is a little easier to understand. And then once again, live presentation is heavily emphasized in classes where not only are teachers lecturing sometimes for more than half the class, but in student presentation days, the students might very well take up a whole class presenting. But what you can do in a flipped classroom is you can actually have students record their presentations. So what I do, and by the way, I'm referring to what I do in a capstone thesis class as well as in a studio class for undergraduates, is I tell them they have to record and it has to be less than 10 minutes or 6 minutes, depending on what it is. I never go more than 10 because if you really have to present what you've done in a project in 10 minutes, anybody can do it. I believe that with all my heart. Now, of course, if you're talking about science and breaking down physics, that could take longer, but I don't think physics is a big factor at FIT. At least not in the sense of broadly looking at our curriculum.
Yeah.
So Jose is going to talk to you a little bit about how students can prepare for their on your own time.
And just to add to that, Jeffrey, what you just talked about there, it requires a lot of planning. As you can see, Jeffrey broke it down nicely, and how videos, then discussions, interaction. It's just not going to happen automatically. The flipped classroom approach requires you to plan ahead and organize your classroom with those activities in mind. So now we're talking about preparing students for your own work, on your own work. And so we're talking about chunking your videos into bite-sized pieces. And we talked about earlier about not lecturing out for hours. And so this is what we're talking about here. Make sure your videos are straight to the point, concise, about 7 to 10 minutes. You can make your videos interactive. You can add polling and quizzing. Also, your homework assignments promote active learning so that your students are not just sitting in the classroom. I know, Jeffrey, I know you like to sometimes have your students go out away from the computer, and take pictures and maybe, take the pictures of whatever work they've done or go on the streets and take pictures of architecture or work of arts and then bring that into the classroom for discussion. And Jeffrey also mentioned about accountability. And that's super important because you want to hold your students accountable for their work. So by attaching a grade to the assignment, now they are responsible for doing the work and providing quality work.
Good. Well, when we talk about attaching a grade, I just want to say everything doesn't have to be A, B, C, D, F. In some cases, you can literally just say it's complete. They did what they had to do, and you can give them formative feedback on how they might do better. But if everything is graded A, B, C, D, F, that sets up a lot of tension for them on the value of every assignment. And let's face it, no student performs optimally for all 15 weeks, and probably most professors will say the same about their teaching performance. But it is important to acknowledge the work that's being done and the work that's not being done. So some assignments might also be weighted um, uh, against participation, for example, as opposed to a project. Some things are just being done so they can bring them into classroom to share. But if you do give them credit, you can also then give no credit to somebody who's done nothing.